Hello, friends, this curious communion of souls. I stand before you not as an authority of doctrine, but as one entrusted with the unfolding mystery of the psyche. In our time, Christianity appears less as a confession of faith and more as a profound mirror, reflecting the depths of our unconscious. I invite you now to journey inward, into the labyrinth of symbols we call Christian history, not as dead relics, but as living, pulsing images embedded in the psyche of humankind. Christianity has never been merely a creed or a system of belief. It is an unfolding drama, a living image carried through centuries in the hearts of men and women. It speaks to us not only of events that transpired 2,000 years ago, but of an inner mystery that continues to shape the psyche of every individual. When one contemplates Christianity with seriousness, it reveals itself as a grand constellation of symbols, images that emerge not from history alone, but from the depths of the unconscious. These symbols are not accidental. They are archetypes, timeless patterns that recur again and again, expressing themselves in myth, ritual, dream, and vision. The figure of Christ is perhaps the most powerful symbol of the self in the Western imagination. He embodies that hidden center of the soul which strives toward wholeness, the reconciliation of the fragmented personality. His life story, from birth to crucifixion to resurrection, is not only a narrative of one man but an archetypal pattern that speaks of the inner journey of each individual. In him we encounter the image of the divine child, the suffering servant, the Redeemer, and finally the transfigured one who has transcended death. Such figures live within us. When we reflect upon them, we awaken latent possibilities in our own nature. To see Christ merely as a teacher of morals is to reduce him. He is an image of the totality that lies beyond the reach of the ego, calling us to a greater integration of our inner life. The cross itself is another profound symbol, a meeting of vertical and horizontal lines. It is the point at which opposites intersect, heaven and earth, spirit and matter, life and death, conscious and unconscious. It is a reminder that the path to wholeness is always one of tension, where opposites must not be denied but held together until something new is born. Each individual carries a cross, whether they recognize it or not, for each life is shaped by the necessity of reconciling opposing forces within. To bear the cross is not simply to suffer, it is to allow the transformation that comes when we no longer flee from conflict but endure it consciously. The resurrection, too, is more than a historical claim. It is an image of renewal that speaks to the deepest layers of the psyche. Out of death emerges life, out of despair a new beginning. This pattern is as ancient as humanity itself. The sun that dies each night and is reborn in the morning, the seed that decays in the soil before it blossoms into fruit. When we are overwhelmed by darkness, when parts of us fall into ruin, we are confronted with the same mystery. The possibility of resurrection is not guaranteed. It demands the courage to enter death consciously, to face what the ego fears most. Only then does the light break through, and a new center of being reveals itself. The symbols of Christianity carry within them an inexhaustible depth. They are not confined to doctrine, but live in dream and vision. Many who have never entered a church still find these images rising within their inner life, for they belong not to one institution, but to the human soul itself. Christ appears in dreams as the wise guide, the healer, the reconciler. The cross emerges in moments of crisis as the demand to suffer meaningfully. The resurrection shines forth when despair is met with courage. These symbols, when taken seriously, can transform the individual, guiding them toward a more complete relation with the self. It is a mistake to interpret these images in purely rational or historical terms, for they are greater than history. They reach back to the primordial layers of the psyche, the Virgin Mother, the dying and rising God, the divine child. These figures appear across cultures and epochs. Christianity has gathered them into a single narrative, giving them a form that has carried Western consciousness for centuries. Yet their source is far older, arising from the wellspring of the collective unconscious. That is why they retain their power even when dogma fades, for they address something eternal within us. One must recognize, however, that symbols lose their vitality when treated as mere abstractions. If we repeat them mechanically, if they are reduced to formulas of belief, they grow hollow, the living image dies, and religion becomes external habit. Only when symbols are experienced inwardly, when they strike the heart and stir the depths, do they perform their true function. They are bridges connecting the conscious mind with the unknown regions of the soul. To encounter them authentically is to be confronted with the mystery of one's own inner life. Christianity, then, should not be seen as a relic of the past, nor as a rigid system of propositions. It is a drama of archetypal imagery unfolding within the psyche of humanity. Its figures and symbols call us to a deeper relation with ourselves and with the mystery that transcends us. The Christ who suffers and rises is the image of our own self striving toward wholeness. The cross we bear is the tension of opposites within our nature. The resurrection is the hope that transformation is possible even in the face of despair. These are not abstractions but living realities, experienced again and again wherever human beings take seriously the depths of their own soul. The path of human life is never a straight ascent toward light, but a winding, often painful journey marked by conflict, loss, and renewal. Beneath the surface of ordinary existence there lies a deeper process, a movement of the psyche that strives for unity and completeness. It is not something we invent or control, rather it unfolds within us, often against the will of the conscious ego. This hidden process is the drama of transformation, and it calls each individual to move beyond the fragments of their personality toward a wholeness that embraces both light and shadow. The images of suffering and renewal found in the sacred traditions are not mere theological fictions, they are psychic realities. Every life sooner or later encounters the necessity of sacrifice. One is asked to confront the shadow, those rejected, feared, or despised aspects of oneself that lurk in the unconscious. The ego naturally resists, preferring to cling to a familiar image of purity, goodness, or competence. Yet, what is left unacknowledged does not vanish. It returns, often in distorted and destructive forms. To face the shadow is to descend into a dark night, to bear the weight of one's own contradictions. Without this descent there can be no genuine growth, for transformation requires that we endure the tension between what we are and what we pretend to be. In the language of myth, this confrontation is often depicted as a death. The old self, bound by rigid identities and unconscious illusions, must perish. One cannot cling to childish certainties or external authorities forever. They eventually crumble under the pressure of life's realities. This collapse, painful though it may be, is necessary. It strips away falsehoods, leaving the individual naked before the truth of their own soul. The death of the old is the precondition of the new. Yet this death is not the end. From the ruins, something greater seeks to be born. Renewal comes not from denying suffering, but from embracing it with consciousness. Just as the seed must decay before it can blossom, the individual must endure dissolution so that a deeper self may emerge. This rebirth is never sudden. It is gradual, often uncertain, and demands patience. The psyche does not unfold on command. One must listen, wait, and suffer through the intervals of silence until the new form becomes clear. This process is mirrored in countless symbols. The descent into the underworld followed by ascent, the crucifixion and resurrection, the alchemical transmutation of base matter into gold. Each of these images points to the same reality, that within the human being there is a force striving for integration. The opposites, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter, and not remain forever split apart. They press toward union. Transformation requires holding these tensions, allowing them to shape us until a new center of being emerges. What arises through this struggle is not perfection in the conventional sense, but wholeness. Wholeness is not the absence of conflict, but the conscious embrace of it. The individual who has passed through transformation is not free of shadow, but has learned to recognize it, to integrate it into a larger totality of self. They no longer identify exclusively with the mask they show the world, nor are they enslaved by hidden compulsions from the unconscious. Instead, they begin to live in relationship to a deeper center, a guiding self that transcends the ego. Such transformation is not without cost. It often demands isolation, misunderstanding, and the courage to stand apart from the collective. Few undertake it willingly, for the path is difficult and without guarantees. Yet those who endure find themselves changed in ways they could never have imagined. They discover an inner authority that does not come from external approval, but from alignment with the deeper order of their being. Life acquires a new depth, and suffering, once meaningless, becomes the crucible of growth. To speak of this process is to speak of mystery, for it cannot be reduced to formulas or doctrines. It must be lived. Every individual has their own path of descent and renewal, their own symbols, their own encounters with the forces of the unconscious. Yet despite these variations, the movement is universal. Wherever human beings take seriously the task of self-confrontation, wherever they accept the necessity of death and rebirth within the psyche, the same archetypal drama unfolds. Thus transformation through individuation is not an optional refinement, a luxury for the contemplative. It is the demand of the soul itself. To refuse it is to remain trapped in incompleteness. Driven by hidden forces one refuses to see. To accept it is to risk everything, yet also to gain that which cannot be taken away, a life lived in conscious relation to the self, a life that, though scarred by suffering, radiates the quiet strength of wholeness. Christianity, when stripped of institutional layers, reveals itself as archetypal. Poetry. Christ is not only a historical figure, he is the self-made manifest, the union of conscious awareness and the vast, unexplored territories beneath. His crucifixion and resurrection, these are not events confined to dusty parchments. They are dramatized myths reenacted daily within your soul. In the sacred narrative, we witness the individuation process in its most vivid form. The suffering of Christ echoes our own confrontation with the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we reject, fear, or deny. The resurrection, then, symbolizes the emergence of wholeness, the reconciliation of opposites, the dawn after the dark night of the soul. And what of the God image? Historically, Christianity posits a Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Yet in the realm of psyche, such a structure remains incomplete. The feminine principle, long repressed or marginalized, has found symbolic expression in the doctrine of the Assumption, raising Mary into the divine quaternity. Here lies an insight. Only when the feminine is integrated does our perception of God become whole, but Christianity must not remain external, a body without a soul. When religion is only faith and outward form, when it is spoken yet never felt, it remains superficial. True religion is enacted in the depths of our own experience. The light has no savior in preaching unless the blind have the courage, and the gift to see the image of God has never been fixed, though many would prefer to believe so. It has shifted, transformed, and unfolded across the centuries, as if shaped by the very evolution of human consciousness itself. What we worship, or what we fear, is always colored by the depths of the psyche in which these images are formed. To observe history is to witness a gradual metamorphosis of the divine figure, a drama that reveals as much about the soul of humanity as it does about heaven. In the ancient world, the gods were plural, each embodying a force of nature or a fragment of the psyche. There were gods of war, fertility, love, and death, each a reflection of some vital aspect of life that pressed upon human beings with overwhelming power. These gods were close to the world, inhabiting the mountains, the seas, the storms. They were not abstractions but living presences, terrifying and alluring. In them we see the early psyche grappling with the immensity of natural forces, projecting them outward in forms that could be approached, feared, or appeased. With the rise of monotheism, this multiplicity gave way to a singular figure. The many gods coalesced into one, transcendent and absolute. This was a momentous psychological shift, for it mirrored a deepening integration within the human soul. The disparate fragments of psychic life were drawn into a unity, an image of wholeness that towered above all else. Yet such unity came at a cost. The shadow, once distributed among many deities, now became compressed beneath the surface of the single, almighty figure. The God who was pure light and goodness cast an equally vast shadow, which could no longer be projected onto rival gods. Instead, it was forced into the realm of the adversary, giving rise to the figure of Satan. Christianity inherited this image and deepened it. The God of wrath and law was joined by the God of love and sacrifice. The figure of Christ introduced an unprecedented intimacy into the divine, a God who suffers and dies. Here, the evolution of the God image reached a turning point, for the divine was no longer remote and untouchable, but entered into the very depths of human pain. This was not merely theology, it was a profound psychological truth. In the image of the crucified one, the human soul was confronted with the mystery that suffering itself belongs to the nature of the divine. Yet even this was incomplete. The official doctrine exalted the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as the final form of God's image. But within the depths of the psyche, something else was stirring. The feminine principle, long suppressed and relegated to the margins, demanded recognition. Without it, the divine image remained partial, lacking the fullness of psychic reality. For centuries, the feminine appeared in the background, in the figure of Mary, the Mother of God, revered yet not fully included in the divine structure. Only much later, through the declaration of the Assumption, was she symbolically lifted into heaven. With this act, though unconscious in its implications, the image of God edged closer to completeness, forming not a trinity but a quaternity, the number that has always symbolized wholeness. The evolution of the God image does not end here. Even now it continues, shaped by the movements of human consciousness. In dreams and visions, people encounter divine figures that differ from the traditional forms. The self presents itself in countless symbolic guises, expanding beyond the limits of established dogma. What was once externalized in heavens and churches begins to reappear within the soul, as if the divine sought not to abandon its traditional form, but to be reborn in new symbols. This unfolding is not without conflict. Whenever the image of God evolves, resistance follows. Institutions cling to the old forms, fearful of losing their authority, while individuals resist the terror of encountering the divine anew within themselves. Yet the psyche cannot be halted. The God image is not an invention of human reason, but a living reality arising from the depths. When one form no longer carries the fullness of meaning, another will emerge. It may appear in unexpected places, in art, in myth, in the private visions of ordinary people. The divine cannot be imprisoned in a single formula. It is as vast and changing as the soul itself. To trace the evolution of the God image is to recognize that what we call God has always mirrored the unfolding of human consciousness. Each new image reflects the demands of the psyche at a particular stage of development. The many gods expressed the fragmented awareness of early humanity. The one God mirrored the longing for unity. The suffering God embodied the necessity of confronting pain. The feminine principle spoke of the need for balance and wholeness. This movement is not yet complete, for the soul itself continues to evolve, and with it the image of the divine. Thus, the God we know today is not the final word, but a symbol in motion, a living presence that shifts as human beings move deeper into the mystery of themselves. To grasp this is not to diminish the divine, but to honor its vitality, for the image of God, like the psyche itself, is not static but endlessly unfolding, revealing layer after layer of the eternal within the flux of time. Religion, when stripped of its living essence, becomes nothing more than a collection of dogmas, rituals, and outward forms. One can repeat prayers, attend ceremonies, and profess belief with the lips, yet remain inwardly untouched. Such religion is like a vessel without water. It has the shape, but not the life. What truly matters is not whether one conforms externally, but whether the soul itself is moved, transformed, and brought into a living relationship with the mystery that we call the divine. Without that inward experience, all doctrine is hollow, and all ritual is mere performance. There is a difference between believing and knowing. Belief can be inherited, accepted, or imposed. It requires no transformation of the individual. Knowledge, however, when it is of a spiritual kind, emerges from within, from the depths of direct experience. It seizes a person, shakes them, and compels them to recognize truths that cannot be denied. This is why the soul does not awaken through doctrine alone. It awakens through encounter, the dream that strikes us with awe, the vision that unsettles, the suffering that opens a hidden depth within us. Religion becomes alive only when it meets us in this way, when it speaks not to the surface of the mind, but to the innermost chambers of being. The symbols of faith are not meant to be recited like formulas. They are living images, bridges between the conscious mind and the unconscious depths. When one says, for example, that light shines in the darkness, it is not merely poetry, it is the description of a psychic reality. The light is consciousness breaking through the heaviness of the unconscious. The darkness is the suffering, the shadow, the unknown. If these words are taken as mere decoration or abstract teaching, they lose their power. But when they are lived, when the individual feels them as the description of an inner reality, then they transform. The words cease to be doctrine and become soul. Many are content to leave religion at the level of the collective. They join with others in repeating creeds, singing hymns, observing customs. There is comfort in this, and indeed the collective has its role. Yet if the individual never moves beyond the external, the soul remains unawakened. True religion does not merely bind us to a community. It draws us into a confrontation with our own depths. It asks us to meet the living God image within, the force that shapes our dreams and our destiny. Such an encounter is rarely comfortable. It demands honesty, courage, and the willingness to endure transformation. This is why genuine religion is often unsettling. It disturbs the complacency of the ego. It asks us to recognize that we are not masters of our own house, that within us lie powers greater than our conscious will. To meet these powers is to be humbled, but also to be enlarged. The ego discovers its limits, but the soul discovers its depths. Outward conformity may create order, but only inner experience creates wholeness. Without it, one may be religious in appearance yet spiritually barren. One cannot rely forever on inherited forms. Each person must discover, in the solitude of their own being, the voice of the eternal. This discovery may be aided by symbols, myths, and teachings, but it cannot be replaced by them. A prayer recited without soul is only sound. A ritual performed without consciousness is only movement. What gives them power is the inward flame that responds, the recognition that these symbols speak of realities stirring within us. Religion must be lived as experience, or it dies. There is danger, too, in clinging to doctrine as if it were the thing itself. When symbols are mistaken for literal truths, they become idols. The letter replaces the spirit, and the mystery is lost. Symbols are not ends but gateways. They are maps that point toward the depths of the psyche, where the divine is encountered. To confuse the map with the territory is to wander endlessly on the surface, never touching the reality within. Thus, the task of religion is not to give easy answers or to maintain external conformity, but to awaken the soul. It is a call to enter into dialogue with the unseen, to face the inner opposites, to be transformed by what is greater than oneself. This cannot be done through doctrine alone. It can only be done through experience, through the soul's direct participation in the mystery. When religion becomes this living encounter, it no longer needs to defend itself. It shines with the light of authenticity. The individual who has been touched by it is changed, and this change radiates outward, often silently, but unmistakably. They need no proof, for they know. They need no arguments, for they have experienced. This is the essence of religion, not belief imposed from without, but truth revealed from within. May this exploration kindle a fire in the hidden chambers of your psyche. Let Christianity be reborn, not as dogma, but as a living myth echoing in your soul. May the symbol of the cross not confine you, but expand you. May Christ not be an idol, but a pathway to your own self. Step into the mystery. Wholeness awaits. Thank you.